Welcome to the Nehemiah Entrepreneurship Community Podcast. I'm your host, Patrice Tsague. I am here with one of our coaches who came back, David Robertson. David, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm doing great, and it's neat to experience you guys from this side of the production, or this side of the show.
I love it. I love it. So we're going to talk about building a successful kingdom coaching practice. And because David has built a successful practice, one thing we try to always do is highlight entrepreneurs and leaders who are doing things that you can model and be inspired by. And David is one of such. What's unique about David's story is that David, we met David several years ago. He went through biblical entrepreneurship, became biblical entrepreneurship certified trainer, also be certified coach. He was with us in the early days of Kingdom Business Coaching, was with us for a while, even attempted to launch biblical entrepreneurship in the Cincinnati area. And then David just disappeared. And David recently reappeared and pretty much shared with me how he applied a lot of practices he learned, a lot of things he learned. He applied it, and he shared with me the successes that he was realizing today. And I said, David, come to the podcast. We want to hear that. What I appreciate about his story is full of candor, just plain honesty in terms of years of struggle. But it's also full of victory in terms of how God turned things around. So if you've been facing some personal challenge in your business, in your life, you've had seasons where you want to, is God really there? This story will inspire you because you'll hear a story about someone who literally went to what we call at Nehemiah Project, the Wilderness Experience, and came out of it not only alive, but thriving. So David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Patrice.
David, let's take it back a little bit. So today you are the founder and CEO of a coaching company called Growthpoint.
Yes.
And Growthpoint. First of all, before we take it back, tell us what is Growthpoint, so that our listeners can understand what you do today. What does Growthpoint do? Tell us
Yeah.
about Growthpoint and where it's based out of, and then we're going to take it back.
Yeah. GrowthPoint is a coaching company. It's I've debated, gone back and forth. Am I a consultant? Am I a coach? Am I a mix of both? But it is a coaching company, and we serve businesses, small businesses that range from 7 and 8 figures, and we help them grow to the next level where they want to be, go through the systemizing their business, scaling, and then ultimately exiting their business, or at least it's either an exit or secession, as you know. And then what that looks like. So we help them. We provide the systems, the tools, the resources, and the support that an owner needs in order to become the CEO that their company needs. So
Awesome. And you're based out of Dallas, is that
yes,
correct?
we are based out of Dallas.
I'm assuming your clients are in Dallas and other parts of the country as well.
Yes, we have clients all over the country. We have coaches all over the country as well, and we have 3 coaches at this point, and have more that we're bringing on. So yeah.
Awesome. So coaching practice all over the country and 3 clients around the country. Let's take it back a little bit, David. So when you and I first met, you were in Cincinnati. Actually, to be more specific, Dayton, Ohio.
Yes.
Is that right? Or the better word? Yeah, Dayton, Ohio. Tell us about this, how things were then, and what led you to kind of joining my project back then.
Let's see. I had built where to start back then? Wow. I had just jumped into starting a heating and air company when I had met you guys. I had started previously. That was the second business I had started. Previously, I started an insurance agency and got into it for all the wrong reasons, for my own significance, for my own wealth, and really just to serve myself. And had fallen flat on my face, and God had said, the summer of 2012 was when I had met you, I believe. That summer, he started saying, I want you to go back into business. And I kept arguing with him, saying no. But I want, and finally, every time I mowed my lawn, he would talk to me about it. And finally, I said, you know what, God, I'm not going to do this unless you take my current job away from me. I've been there, done that, don't want anything to do with it, almost lost my marriage because of it, and don't want anything to do with business. And he said, yeah, but you did it for yourself then. I want you to figure out what it means to be in business to glorify me. And I said, still, no. And so I that was on a Sunday. By Thursday that week, mowing my lawn Sunday after church, Thursday, I had been written up 3 times and lost my job. And it was one of those things where literally I could have, it was probably wrongful practice in the way I was hired, except the fact that it was an answer to God, an answer to my rebellion. I couldn't argue with it. But at that time I was like, all right, well, where do I start? What does it mean to do business God's way? And what does it mean to be in business to glorify him? And so at that point I started looking, starting talking to people. I started a small group at the church called Anointed for Business. I did not know there was a book out there called that. And someone in the church noticed it, Barry James. He noticed that I had started a group, and he said, hey, you may want to come to a meeting that I'm having to talk about faith in business and kingdom business. And I said, okay, yeah, sure, I will. And so I came to his office, and we sat around, got to his boardroom in the office. And as people were introducing themselves, I realized quickly that I was in some place that I had no qualifications to be in. Here I am, a furnace guy, drop out of college, just start a business randomly, and have more business failures and learning experiences than I do success. And here's CPA this, and quite a few MBA people and people that run multi-million-dollar companies, and here I am, just a furnace guy. But when I heard you speak about kingdom business and what it means to be, I think that you spoke about what it means to be royalty, or from royalty into royalty. And you gave your testimony and talked about biblical business and what it means to be a kingdom business. I was all on board, and it sounded like something a little bit more organized version of what I was trying to accomplish with the small group, and trying to learn myself. So that's, I don't know if that's.
So from there, you ended up not only coming to our conference, but also you end up becoming a certified trainer and coach with us.
Yes.
So let's talk a bit about that season of your life before your next transition. As you were attempting to do what you felt in your heart to do, as you began to with us, tell me about that season. What are some things that you really learned that was good? What are some challenges you faced at that time?
Yeah. The biggest challenge was that opinion. Here I am, a furnace guy. Who am I? I have more failure than success. Who am I to speak to other business people? And I think I knew it at the time. I think anybody around me probably knew it at the time too. But that was the biggest challenge is God has called me to something that I literally have no qualification for whatsoever. And
this kind of imposter syndrome kind of deal, right?
Yes, 100% imposter syndrome. And everywhere I turned, I grew up in church, so I was taught I have to be truthful. I have to be a man of integrity. I have to be honest. I can't lie. But here I was when I was teaching biblical entrepreneurship, or I was coaching entrepreneurs about business, here I was feeling like a failure myself, and feeling like how not only a failure, but I'm actually trying to do something to glorify God, but I feel like I'm lying and I have no integrity with it.
Oh,
And
I love it.
it was not a fun place to be in, which is probably why I just disappeared, because I couldn't take the pressure of being what I thought at the time was being a fake.
Wow. And we, there's a concept that we talk about in biblical entrepreneurship, the integrity gap,
Yes.
where there's one, you project one thing, but then you are, or you feel like you're another, and there's this gap in between. And in that gap is guilt, condemnation, all this stuff.
100%.
And nobody knows, but you feel it. And that pressure often causes us to run away, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Well, then you made a pivot.
Yes.
That included you relocating as well as you kind of pulling out. Tell us about that transition.
Yeah, that was it was I'll say this. I made a pivot and went into I still couldn't get away from coaching, because I felt like God was saying, like, this is your calling. You can't get away from it. And I would literally try to walk away from it, and it would just every time the presence of God, I was in the presence of God in a worship service, in a Bible study, anything, this coaching thing would come back up. And any person, like I'd go out and try to build relationships with people, and it was only business owners that I could build a relationship with. And it was just, well, for whatever reason, everybody else stayed away from me, but business owners came. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I have to figure this out. And I need some training and education myself. So I went and found a business coach who happened to be the Kingdom guy, and figured out what it meant to be a business coach, what it meant from more of the hands-on, what it meant to grow a business, what does a healthy business look like. And so I kept doing that while keeping an offer open on social media and stuff for business coaching. And I had a couple clients come through. The fourth client in particular, he was in a real rough spot. About 700,000 in his business. He had hit $1 million and bumped back down, which is something that I learned was actually pretty normal for a business to hit 1, 2, 3 million and not be able to break through that capacity barrier. It's like the rules of the game changed when he hit that. And he was working. He was a dirt contractor, excavating company, and he anyway, I started working with him. In fact, he couldn't pay, and I said, "Hey, I'll coach you for 60 days, and afterwards, if it's worth it to you, you can start paying, and if not, then we'll go on and part as friends, and no one will be hurt." So I'm still working with him today. But the transition, the entire time that's going, I was like, I'm learning, I'm trying to do the right thing. God, when is this growth going to happen? And I felt him saying, you're going to hit a season of rapid business growth when you move to Dallas, Texas. And my wife's family lived in Midland, Texas, which is about 5 hours away from Dallas. And I said, well, maybe I'll convince her to. And he said, no, I don't want you to tell anybody about this until it has to happen on my timing, not yours. So here for probably 4 years, I'm working saying, all right, God, what is this? What is going on? In 2019, my wife started talking about, let's move to be with my mom. And I'm like, yes, that's one step closer. Maybe it's not Dallas. Maybe I heard wrong. Maybe it's Midland. And so we moved to Midland and literally moved into the desert. And where I met,
it's almost symbolic of what you're going through.
It is 100%. It is 100% symbolic. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get an office. I'm going to do this. We're going to grow, rapid business growth. Here we come. And immediately the business stalls out. and lose everybody but one client. And I'm like, oh. And I said, God, what do I do? And everything I'm trying to do to get, like, I have rent now. I have this things that it's not just me in a basement. It's not just me in my office in the basement. We're living with my mother-in-law, and I have an office to pay for. And he says, just be with me. And I was like, okay. So I prayed. I'm like, I'm glad I'm with you. Now what? He said, just be with me. And so the next day I prayed and spent some time in prayer and worship. Now what? Just spend time with me. And that happened for 6 months. Every day where I wake up and say, what do you want me to do, Lord? And he would say, literally, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a chair right there. Just sit in the chair and be with me. Worship me, pray, study my word. So that's what I did. And that was kind of in the middle of the season of what I call the wilderness season. I had one hiccup where business came to me. Someone reached out and said, hey, we've heard you're a business coach. We want you to come speak at it was a home builder, one of the nation's top 100 home builders. Also a Kingdom business guy. He heard on the podcast, I'd had him on a show that I had done at the time called Christ in Business. And he said, we need coaches for our trade partners. We want you to come speak at our leadership conference, and we want you to be the recommended business coach for our contractors. And I was like, okay, that's great. I'll do that. 2020 had the best month ever in coaching. Had since then look back on that, and it was a good growth point, but it hit that number. And I said, great, this is the time. We're ready to go. I took all of that revenue instead of asking God what to do with it. I took all of that revenue and invested it back into marketing the company and started getting leads and generating appointments and everything. And then that happened had my calendar booked for 2 weeks, a history of closing 100% of those calls. And that the day of the appointment, the first appointment I had, Trump made the announcement and said, we're encouraging everybody to shut down the economy. And I'm like, so over $10,000 invested into this campaign, dead on arrival. And I said, at that point, I wanted to quit and walk away. And God said, I want you to take this year and not do anything in business. Like, take one full year with me. And I said, at that point, I was at the point where I said, okay, clearly I'm missing something. So yes, I'll do that. And for the next year, for the 12 and a half months, I literally spent, before it was 2 to 3 hours a day. Now it was 6 to 8 hours a day in that chair, praying, worshiping, and God, meeting God for the first time, I guess. Like, I knew him from a head point, from a head perspective, but really had never received from him the love of Christ. I've always received it from a check this box, and yes, I'm going to heaven, and yes, I want to dedicate my life to him, but never really became personal until that year.
Wow.
And it was, it's who I was before that year and who I was after that year is completely different. So.
Wow. I'm talking with David Robertson. He's the CEO and founder of Growthpoint, a coaching company based out of Dallas, Texas. David was certified trainer and coach with us, and then he transitioned, built his own practice, doing very well today. We talk about his journey from the wilderness to building a successful Kingdom business coaching practice. Thank you, Milan, for watching and being with us. So, David, as you're sharing, I'm thinking about the framework that we teach our coaches and trainers about the importance of building their practice and their business around biblical best practice,
Yeah.
which is, and then moving them to biblical principles, and then the supernatural. I'm just seeing where you saw best practice, you went in by biblical principles, and then I see where the supernatural begin to occur in your life as you walk it out. So, as let me go back a bit before all this. So, when you think back of your days with Nehemiah, the things here, uh, are there anything that you say, you know what, this is what I learned here, even though those were tough seasons for you, that you then were able to build on forward?
Um, yes. It was, I, I, I learned that there was a significant difference between just business as usual
Mm.
and business with a mission to impact the kingdom or impact eternity. I think that eternal bottom line that we talk about in NBE was huge. I also, through the journey that I've described so far, I learned that it's not my business that gives me significance. It's not the position as a coach that gives me significance. It's not the results that give me significance. It's Jesus who gives me significance.
Amen.
And if he tells me to do something, if he told me to go start I don't know, aeronautical engineering company, I'd question myself at first a little bit, rightfully so, but I would then figure out who do I do this with and how do I get it done. I learned to stop through that time and through that journey. I learned to stop asking, stop saying I don't have it, and start asking how can I get it, as far as experience or as resources or how what is his plan to do that, and then also along with that is just shoring up integrity issues that I had, where my reaction to fear was more important than the integrity that I had in the relationships and the people, the way I treated them, or communication, over communication is a big value of mine now, and um, and then also the value of confrontation, which is something that I'd never would have done in the past. The value of confrontation has also been taught as time goes on.
Wow. Wow. That is incredible. What I love about your story is that really a candid, transparent look at when you begin a journey and you've not dealt with your brokenness, how
Yes.
that affects your journey. David, as you doing this, you have a wife and you have a child, right?
Yeah.
So tell me how all this is impacting the family, whether it's lack of provision or just the trials you're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife was, when God told me to take a year off, I was telling someone that was helping get set up technical. They asked a couple questions, and I was telling them when God told me to take a year off, I didn't tell anybody. I was too ashamed. My wife was working full time, overtime, trying to get, yeah, making bills, paying bills. And here I was sitting, that was supposed to be what I've been taught, the breadwinner of the house, the supporter of the house, the provider. And here I was sitting in a chair praying and listening to worship music. And so I didn't tell them at all what was going on. I wanted to shield my wife from the uh, the insecurity of it. I didn't tell her when revenue dropped. I didn't tell her when it went up. I didn't tell her. anything. It wasn't until towards the end of that where I realized that by trying to protect her, by trying to be her protector, her comforter, I was actually stealing from her personal growth and spiritual growth. I was actually stealing the role of the Holy Spirit in her life.
That is good.
And then when God asked me to do something that was on the back of 18-month journey that he had been taking me through that I wasn't allowing her to see, it was anyway, I think probably the biggest thing was the aha moment when I realized I was actually stealing her spiritual growth by not allowing her to participate in prayer or participate in even just crying together over stuff. Like
Wow.
as trying to be the protector, I was actually stealing from the ultimate God who protects us, the ultimate comforter and our protection, our provision.
And it goes back to that shame, right? That shame and guilt,
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
which cause us to create these blockages where we don't allow our family and friends to be intimate with us, so they can grow with us. We take on the savior syndrome, right? That is pretty powerful. So David, but God does turn it around, and let's talk about kind of how you turn around and where you are now and what's forward looks like.
Yeah. Right before that year, I got an invite into Forbes Coaches Council. And I have to lay a little bit of the backstory. At the time, the Forbes Coaches Council was more revenue than I had coming in for the month. And I felt God saying, I want you to do it, and I want you to do it this month. Like, don't save for it, don't plan for it, just do it. And I'm like, I don't, that doesn't sound like wisdom to me. So I went to my friends and I asked them, I went to my advisors and asked them, and there were a lot of people who said, yeah, that's ridiculous. Don't do it. Save for it. Don't go get a credit card to do it, which I don't recommend. But then there were a few people that I knew trusted God and I knew heard God's voice and had a track record of knowing God's voice, who said, if God told you to do it and you believe that he did it, I don't see a way that you can not do it. Because if you say you're going to obey God and you feel like he's telling you to do something, right there, that just says, go obey it. And it's clear you don't want to. So it's not like you're trying to deceive yourself into something. So I did it. That month, they changed the requirements to be a coach's council to being a 7-figure coach at the end of that month. So I got grandfathered into this community, which was awesome. That's great. But still, it didn't really come anything. I took the year off, didn't think anything of it. Someone did send me an email in September of that year, though, that's saying, hey, we're writing an article. Would you mind giving your thoughts? And I said, yeah, sure. I type up some thoughts and give it away. Couple sentences there and didn't even think anything of it. Well, about 2 months later, I get an email saying, you're featured on Forbes. And so I was like, wow, that's awesome. So I clicked on it and I was it was a question about how to work on your business, not in your business, which is something that I've seen business owners ask all the time. Is like, we know this advice, work on your business, not in your business. How do you do it though? So I wrote a piece of advice about that, and it ended up being featured as the #1 on the article for an expert panel on business builders. And that was cool. I shared it and great. Nothing really came from it still. About 90 days later, right at the end of the year of rest, the president of Forbes Councils reached out to me and said, hey, we're starting a coaching program, or our coaching program is growing, and our VP of coaching needs to talk to you about coming on, and we'd like to hire you and your company as a coach. That was also the week after God said, all right, it's now the Sabbath year's over. It's been 12 months. And I want you to move to Dallas. And so there's a lot of details here that I don't want to take too much time on, but it was basically a forced move to Dallas. My wife would have never done it, and if God hadn't have done what he did at that point. So we moved there to be with my in-laws. COVID happened. The oil economy crashed. Her father-in-law lost stepfather lost his job and only got searching for 9 months and only found a job in Dallas.
Wow.
So and it was like, okay, well, now we got to move to Dallas to be with them because there's nothing here in the desert that we want. The moment we hit Dallas, I don't know what happened. We kind of moved in faith saying, God, we have this amount of money. My wife quit her job and said, I'm not going back to work. I don't feel like, I think it's God saying that he's going to provide. And so we said, God, you have 3 months. 3 weeks later, everything financially was met. The business had tripled in size, and it has kept growing since then to the point where now I have a VP of marketing that we've just brought on. We have several coaches that we're hiring on, and all of that has been in the last 6 months. None of it I could have explained myself. And the ironic thing about it is hasn't come from Forbes. It hasn't come from Fast Company. It's been organic Growthpoint growth. I think Forbes was just God's way of giving my wife peace. Like, hey, now my husband's got real credentials, and meanwhile he's blessing the company. So anyway. I hope that answers your question, but it has been. I can't point to any one specific thing other than him that would. Literally, someone asked me the other day. I said, "Yeah, you say that, but I'm sure there's things you've learned, and the only things that I've learned is to go to God, and literally let Him be the source of my provision." And every morning I pray the Lord's Prayer or the Disciples' Prayer, however you want to say it. But when I pray, hallowed be your name, I have to look at all of those names that I learned. I can't be my wife's comforter when he's the comforter. Or I can't be my family's provision when he's the provision. I can't be the healer when he's the healer. And keep praying that those names, that those roles that his name state and declare in my life stay holy. I'm working very hard to steward what he gives me instead of trying to force and perform myself.
Wow. I love that line. I'm trying very hard to steward what he gives me versus trying to perform yourself. I wish we all had that same kind of sentiment. You recently made a decision to rejoin back with us as we land this plane. What motivated you, and what are you hoping the second time around to happen that didn't happen the first time?
Yeah. In December, if you guys haven't caught on, speaking to the people watching yet, I spend a lot of time in prayer now, and I anything that gets in the way of that, I try to guard pretty closely. But I was praying, and I felt like God saying He wanted me to legally give my business to God, and exploring what that meant. I knew some of the solutions in the legislature out there, and as I thought through what it would look like to do that, and I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll talk to my wife. She's a shareholder, and we'll go ahead and do that." And she said, "But I want you to do it publicly, and I want you to do it in a way that my body can follow." So I don't know what that means specifically, other than that I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it publicly. I'm going to do it in a way that people follow. But if still to this day, and I've looked, still to this day, biblical entrepreneurship is the global authority on biblical entrepreneurship. It's Nehemiah Project and the community and the network that you guys have is far better than anything else I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of the courses out there. I've met and talked with a lot of the people out there that lead, that are some of what I call mountain leaders of the business mountain. And you guys still have the best. You capture God's heart so nice, so there's just something unique about your system. It's biblical, it's spirit led, it's spirit filled. It captures the knowledge and the spirit of what it means to do work as worship. And so the first person I wrote down in my prayer journal is I've got to connect back with Patrice, because if someone's going to follow whatever I do as far as leading, they ought to be following biblical entrepreneurship. They ought to be following that process and understand what it means to be a biblical entrepreneur.
Wow.
My company, if a client goes through a year of my program and doesn't come to know the love of Jesus, then I've failed as an organization. I don't care if they say yes to him or no to him. I mean, I do care. For their own sake, I care.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to fire them as a client. But if they haven't been brought to a point where they can say yes or no in that first year, I've failed. I really look at what we do as a discipleship program or an evangelism program, to bring people into the awareness of who God is and how their business is affected spiritually. I don't claim to, I wouldn't even begin to reinvent or reteach or repackage what you guys do, because you guys do it so well that if after someone comes along and makes a decision that then now they are going to be faith active in their business, how do I coach them through that process? I'd rather bring them through the authority on it and bring them right to it, and take them through that content and help create discipleship in the marketplace, which is what Growthpoint is. It's a discipleship ministry. We just use the results of business to win the respect to do it.
Wow. I like the line. David Robertson. What an interesting story. What a journey from Dayton, Ohio to Dallas, Texas, from an imposter to the real deal, from what was the company again? From a heating and cooling?
Yeah. First rate home services.
Home service to Kingdom Business Coach. What an amazing story. Well, David, thank you for re-engaging back with us. David, somebody's watching. Thank you also for those compliments. We do appreciate it. Somebody watching and listening, they're saying, I want to plug in to what you're doing, David, either as a client or even as a coach. How do they get in touch with you?
They can, if they want to plug in as far as business growth goes, they have a business that they want to take through the growth points. They can go to growthpointos.com. We have an assessment that breaks over, working with over 100 and probably over 200 by now, owners. And I've learned that there are only 5 things that a business has to do to create growth. They have to attract attention, convert it to a sale, deliver results and a wow experience, steward resources, and build a team. If they do those 5 things well, they will grow. Of course, you and I know that growth is not all the same. There's growth that creates chaos and growth that creates freedom and profitability.
That's right.
What happens in the way you do those 5 things, whether you're the man in the van or a Fortune 100 CEO, the way you do those 5 things is only a matter of how sophisticated you get. And the rules of business change as you grow. That requires more sophistication. So we have an assessment on growthpointos.com that kind of is the operational assessment of what is missing and what's holding your business back from that next stage of growth. So you can find that on there, and it really breaks down. It gives your business a score, a total score, and then each of the 5 areas for marketing, sales, operations, accounting, and leadership. What it gives your business a score and tells you what you need to do next, basically. So that is where we've talked about charging for that. At this point, it's free, and it's a gift that I want to give you guys. But then, if at the same time, you can just follow me on social media. If you go to thedavidrobertson.com, you can follow what I'm doing. It's kind of like my own separate story, parallel to Growthpoint. And it's you can follow there.
I love it. David Robinson, founder, CEO of Growthpoint Coaching. He's an exit planning coach, international speaker to, I like this, predictable profit, and he is part of the Forbes Council. David, what an incredible story. I'm going to bring you back later when we do that dedication, and when you actually fully dedicate your business to the Lord in the way you
Yes.
talked about, so that we can talk about that experience here and others can hear how it's done. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I'd love to.
Connect with David at growthpointos.com. There you can take advantage of his assessment. You can also go to davidrobinson.com, right? And there they can learn more about you and your story. Listen, before you leave, I'm going to have David give you some word of advice. So don't you leave yet, because we're wrapping up. Because David, before we pray for our audience, we want them to hear some insights from you in terms of what they may be facing right now. But before we do, though, I do want to encourage you to go ahead if you want to know more about the Nehemiah Project and how we can come alongside you and work with you, providing you with training, coaching, access to capital, or to plug into our community. Go to NehemiahEcommunity.com. There, you can learn about biblical entrepreneurship that David talked about. You can learn about kingdom business coaching that he talked about. You can learn about the Nehemiah Entrepreneurship Community, which is an entrepreneurship community of entrepreneurs who are kingdom-minded. We have members from Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, and North America. And by the way, membership does have its privileges, and together we can transform the world. You can also learn about access to capital, where if you need capital to grow your business, we do have members, and we have our own fund where we can come alongside you with capital to grow your business. So if you enjoyed this podcast, listen, friends share with friends that which they enjoy. So I want you to share it. Share it on your social media platform, share it to your email, share with others. You may know somebody like David who has had or has an imposter syndrome, who has unbelief, who struggles with the destiny that God has called them to become, or who might just need what David has to offer. Share with them and encourage them to plug in. With that said, David, before we pray for our audience, there's somebody who's watching right now, and they're saying, David, I am where you were. I'm in the wilderness. I'm having imposter syndrome. God has given me a call, but I'm struggling with embracing it, because there's this gap between who I am right now and what God has called me to become. What advice would you give him, David?
The short answer is simple: is spend more time with him. I tend to be someone who takes extreme action. So I would not just say spend more time with him, because to some of you spend 20 minutes with him, 30 minutes, and you pray and you read your Bible. But I would actually spend enough time with him to the point where you don't know what to do next with him. And get yourself to the edge of the point where I don't know how, like when I started praying with him, like an hour was like at the edge. It's like, what do I do now? Like I've prayed, I've sang songs, I've played guitar, I've studied, I've looked up the Greek and the Hebrew, I've written out my prayers, what do I do now? And it gets to the point where to be in the posture where I don't have anything to bring to you anymore, Lord. I just want to receive you and your heart. That's a life-changing point when you can get to that point. Whatever you have to do to get to that point where you don't have much more to bring him other than your attention, at that point he can steer your attention. To be a kingdom business, you have to be led by a king. And so getting to the point where it's not about what you have to offer or pray or the agenda that you set, but what he is leading you into. More healing comes from that point than anything else.
Wow. I like the line, to be a kingdom business, you have to led by a king. You've said a lot of tweetable moments here, brother. This is good stuff. Listen, David Robertson, CEO of Growthpoint, and I keep wanting to say Growthpoint International, of Growthpoint Coaching Company.
I'll take that prophetically. Yeah.
Amen. He's a kingdom business coach and based out of Dallas, Texas. To get in touch with him, visit him at growthpointos.com. Listen, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Let me pray for you. David, thank you so much. Looking forward, man, to walking with you and what God has in store for us in the years and months ahead. With that said, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord enable you, wherever you are around the world, to be faithful over the talents he's placed under your care and to steward them in such a way that one day, like David is experiencing right now, you will hear those wonderful words. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. Guess what? He'll not make you rule over much. God bless you. Thanks for watching and listening. David, thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you.